Why does the Middle East have straight line borders? So let's get right into it. Drawing the Middle East's modern borders on a map with a ruler certainly seems simple. Perhaps that's why the lines, set in 1916 by Englishman Sir Mark Sykes and Frenchman Francois-Georges Picot, were straight ones. The infamous Sykes-Picot Agreement was a pact between Great Britain and France made in the middle of World War I with Russia's blessing. With it, they planned to completely dismember the Ottoman Empire. It led to the division of the Turkish-held Middle East into 5 French and British-administered countries: today's Syria, Lebanon, Israel, then called Palestine, Jordan, and Iraq. During World War I, the Turks had sided with Germany and Austria-Hungary and basically faced a war on 3 fronts. Sykes and Picot were both colonial aristocrats and believed in the quaint notion that second and third world countries were incapable of self-rule and far better living under their European masters. They had carved up Africa in a similar fashion. Plus, the warring sides of World War I were oblivious to the fact that the Middle East sat on the largest hidden oil reserves in the world. At the time, all the two empires wanted was open shipping routes to Russia through Istanbul and a secure Suez Canal connection to India through Egypt. So the two men literally drew straight lines on a map, dividing up territory ruled by the Ottoman Empire for over 400 years into brand new countries: Syria and Lebanon, which would be under French control in the north; Iraq, Jordan, and Palestine, which would be under British control in the south. Beneath them all sat Arab-controlled Saudi Arabia. Following the end of World War I in 1918, the deed was done and signed into all the treaties. Their hastily negotiated agreement continues to have profound ripple effects to this day. For you see, the Sykes-Picot Agreement had many problems. The first lay in those damn straight lines, which failed to take into account any sectarian, tribal, or ethnic divisions. Sykes and Picot envisioned Lebanon as a Christian haven, Palestine with the Jewish community, and Syria, Jordan, and Iraq with the region's Muslims. That, of course, never happened, and old racism and hatreds, suppressed for decades under strict Ottoman rule, came boiling back to the surface. Second, the agreement was made with no Arab input of any kind. That's right, none. And it ignored a promise Britain had made to the Arabs that if they sided with them and rebelled against the Turks in World War I, they would finally gain their independence. When independence did not materialize after the war, Arab politics gradually shifted from constitutional parliaments set up by the empires to militant kingdoms. This led to the rise of dictatorial regimes that dominated many Arab countries for decades to this day. During World War I, Britain was willing to recognize and support Arab independence. The Arabs fulfilled their part of the agreement and revolted against the Turks, fueled in part by the famous British archaeologist T.E. Lawrence, also known as Lawrence of Arabia. Britain, however, did not live up to its side of the deal. Lawrence later wrote that the Arab revolt was useful as it marched in line with Britain's aims, that is, it helped break up the vast Ottoman Empire. But he also warned the tribes were even less stable than the Turks, a, quote, tissue of small, jealous principalities incapable of cohesion, end quote. During the 1800s, the Ottoman Sultan had taken a more or less hands-off approach to governing the Middle East and did little to promote their progress. At the first sign of any tribal identity, the Turks beheaded the movement's leaders. The Sykes-Picot Agreement was a blatantly imperialistic solution. It took no account of the wishes of the people, ignored Arab and Kurdish boundaries, and provoked conflicts which continue to plague the region to this day. No other region on Earth has seen so many border wars, civil wars, and deadly coups in recent decades. In 1918, World War I finally came to an end with a victory for the Allies. The Ottoman Empire was defeated, carved up like a tired bull, and split amongst the victors. Instead of the nation-states Britain and France had promised the Arabs, the victors divided the Middle East into countries which, because of those damn straight lines, are still amongst the most difficult to govern on Earth. The strains unleashed on the Arab world after World War I remain as acute as they ever have been 100 years later. The Middle East still finds itself with a 1916 map that ignored the region's Islamic and ethnic realities. There were Arabs and Kurds, Sunnis and Shiites, Muslims and Jews. The nations and borders are still seen today as illegitimate by many of their own citizens. World War I spilled over into World War II, of course. This was followed by the founding of Israel in 1948, the race for Arab oil in Iraq, 3 Egypt-Israeli wars, countless Sunni Shiite Kurdish conflicts, 2 Iran-Iraq wars, 2 Persian Gulf wars, and the rise of Al-Qaeda and ISIS. With the exception of the 1978 Camp David Egypt-Israeli peace accords, no lasting peace has stuck in the region. The result has been seemingly unending conflicts that have yet to come to an end over a century later, all due to a few straight lines drawn on a map by 2 men 100 years ago.